Well, at least it was you that broke it, Aaron.
It must have been
this
me.
time. Just say good morning to those. Hopefully, they'll be back on Zoom in a little bit, but also to those I know will be watching on YouTube later. I'm going to try to just hop right in. Sermon's going to be shorter, I think, because I know the kids are going to camp. Parents are going to be driving their kids out to camp. It's going to be a lot of stuff going on. But I didn't know if you know, but did you know today is literally Pentecost Sunday? Most of us are familiar with Acts chapter 2, where it was on the day of Pentecost when the Jesus movement, the ecclesia, the church, the body of Christ, began their movement. And I'm going to talk about that next week. But I thought this week, for just a few minutes, we would go back and we would look at the beginning, the origin, the purpose of what Pentecost was. Pentecost actually literally means 50th. It means 50. That is the Koine Greek. That is what the New Testament was written in, the original language of the New Testament. But in the Old Testament, it was known as the Festival of Weeks, the Festival of Harvest. As a matter of fact, we'll begin in Leviticus chapter 23. So you can turn to Leviticus chapter 23. I'll tell you in just a moment the verse. What we talk about today is life-changing, literally. It is a miracle. How God acts and works in our life, and how He acts and works even through something that we're going to be talking about from the Old Testament, the origin of the Festival of Harvest, which is Pentecost. Many of us may be already aware, we may already know what we're going to talk about today. For some of us, it may be something brand new that we've never heard before. But either way, my goal, my prayer is that it will change the dynamics of your week this week. That every day that it will change the dynamic of every encounter with people that we have, regardless of who they are, regardless of their standing in life, regardless of how much darkness they may be in, or how much light they may be in, regardless of their economic standing, that this will change the way that we approach every situation, the way that we approach every day. And the origin of Pentecost, the origin of the Feast of Harvest, it began after Moses had delivered, how God actually was the one who delivered the people out of Egyptian slavery. 400 years they were slaves in Egypt. Just think 4 or 5 generations of people had been born, had died in slavery. Some of them did not know what freedom was. And when we say slavery, this wasn't something that was easy. It was something where the Egyptian taskmasters were very brutal. They were very harsh on the Israelites, God's chosen people that He had chosen whenever he went to Abraham, and He told Abraham, I want to build a great nation of people through you. And through this nation, I want to bless them so that the whole world will know that there is one true God. But not just me blessing you. Now, then when I bless you, I want you to go out and I want you to bless the world. I want you to bless all of these pagan nations around you so that they can put a faith in me. So what should have taken 11 days for them to go from Egypt to the Promised Land. We talked about that, I don't know, a couple of 3 weeks ago. Norma. It took 40 years. What should have been an 11-day journey took 40 years. Why? Because during those 40 years, God was wanting the people to put their faith and trust in Him. When they saw all of these miracles that He had done in releasing them from this slavery, they rebelled against God. They wouldn't listen to His voice. They rejected His guidance, that He wanted to guide them. They rejected all of that. And because of that, they stopped on the way. They stopped for 1 year. They stayed 1 year at Mount Sinai during this 40-year trip. And during that 1 year, God was giving them all of these different commands and all of these different teachings and how they need to live their life and to try to help them to be transformed. He gave them all of these different feast days and ceremonies and traditions that He wanted them to incorporate into their life so that their hearts and lives would be transformed, because He wanted to give them a brand new land. He wanted to give them this promised land that was going to be very fertile. It was going to be very rich in fruits and vegetables and the grasses for their sheep and their cattle and any kind of other livestock that they would have. God wanted to bless them. So He gave them some reminders. And one of those is the festival of harvest that we read about in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 15 and 16. He told them from the day after the Sabbath. The Sabbath day would begin on Friday at 6 p.m. and it would go through Saturday at 6 p.m. That was the Sabbath day. So He said from the day after the Sabbath, the day you bring the bundle of grain to be lifted up as a special offering, count off 7 full weeks. Keep counting until the day after the 7th Sabbath. 50 days later. That's the word Pentecost. 50 days later. Then present an offering of new grain to the Lord. So the festival of harvest. God is saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to provide for you. When you get to do this new land, I'm going to provide you with a rich harvest. And once you start harvesting this first harvest of the season, go 50 days. And as you're harvesting this grain, I want you to honor me. I want you to bring an offering to me to honor me. To realize that it's not you. That you're not doing this on your own, but I'm continuing to provide for you. So now I want us to flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 17. In Deuteronomy chapter 16, we'll be looking at verses 9 through 12. So in Leviticus, they stopped during their journey. This 40-year journey at Mount Sinai, spent a year. God was giving them some instructions. In Deuteronomy, the whole book of Deuteronomy, they are literally on the cusp of entering the promised land. In the whole book of Deuteronomy, everything about this, Moses is going through everything all over again because right now they are camped out right on the border of the promised land. So he wants to remind them, when you move into this land, this promised land that God has promised to you, here are some things that we need to remember. Don't ignore God. Don't forget God. Don't forget who has brought you to this land. And so he tells them in Deuteronomy 17, count off 7 weeks from when you first begin to cut the grain at the time of harvest. Then celebrate the festival of harvest to honor the Lord your God. Bring Him a voluntary offering in proportion to the blessings that you have received from Him. This is a time to celebrate before the Lord your God at the designated place of worship that He will choose for His name to be honored. Celebrate with your sons and your daughters, your male and your female servants, the Levites from your towns, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows who live among you. Remember that you once were slaves in Egypt, so be careful to obey all of these decrees. This festival was to be a celebration. It was to be a time for the whole nation of Israel, for all 12 tribes of Jacob, for all 12 sons of Jacob, and all of their nations that they had built, all of these 12 nations, for all of them to come together united. To come together as community before God. They were to enjoy being together. They were to enjoy each other as they celebrated and enjoyed God. And so he told them, whenever you come together like this on the 50th day, on Pentecost, after you have harvested the crop, start when you first harvested it, but start bringing your offerings to me. And if you notice something, church, this wasn't talking about tithing. There wasn't a tithe. Matter of fact, God said, I want you to bring whatever you can bring that's in proportion with what your blessing is. I want you to just give freely. Just bring what you can give of your wheat harvest, of your barley harvest. So what did God do with that? So why would God need wheat? Why would God need food like that? Well, if you notice, it wasn't for God. It was to God in honor of God, but did you notice what they did with the food? They celebrated. They had this feast that they enjoyed together. But then also, there were a lot of other people that were involved that we'll get to in just a moment. But it was to be a celebration. And he said, I want you to celebrate with all of the community. There's no one to be left out. When you come together, everyone is welcome. You're not to leave off certain people. You bring your sons and your daughters. You bring your male and female servants. The Levites who are living in your towns, the foreigners, the orphans, the widows, everybody that's living among you, you bring all of them. They're all welcome at my table. They're all welcome at my feast. Everyone. No one's to be excluded. They are to love their neighbor. That was one of the core teachings of God in the Old Testament law. Love your neighbor. And what God was giving them was, He was giving them a way to put this into action in their life. Church, I need to understand loving my neighbor. Loving others is not just lip service. This is one of the things I was talking about that could change the dynamic of your week this week, change the dynamic of my week. How often do I get in such a hurry? That I don't see people? How often do I get in such a hurry that I don't hear people? If you were to ask me, well, hey, David, do you love these people? Oh, yeah, I love these people. But am I putting into practice the way that God shows me and guides me to put into practice ways to show my love for my neighbor? And who is your neighbor? You remember Jesus was asked that question by this lawyer? Well, Jesus, who's my neighbor? My neighbor is anyone who has a need. That's in the story that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan. It doesn't matter if they're an enemy. It doesn't matter if they think differently than I think. It doesn't really matter if you know what, they don't even believe in God. If they're an atheist, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're living a godly life or if they're living a very ungodly life. It doesn't matter politically what they believe. You see, it's really about me. It's really about my heart. It's really about my relationship with my Father God. I claim to love God. I claim to love my neighbor before my Father. I make that claim. But do I show that in my everyday life, in my everyday activity? So what is it that will compel me? What is it that will compel you? What is it that will compel us to include all people? And let me just say this. I think most of us are already aware of this, but you know, when we say that everybody is welcome here, everybody is welcome in this gathering right here, everyone is welcome in this gathering. It doesn't matter. And if somebody watches this later on YouTube, yeah, everyone is welcome to the table of grace, to the table of Jesus. There's no one that is left out. Yeah, but David, what if it's this kind of person that comes? Or what if it's that kind of person that comes? What if it's some kind of person, man, they're in so much darkness and they're proud to be in that kind of darkness? What did God's voice tell these people as they were on the cusp of going into the promised land? What did He tell them would compel them? That everyone is invited to this feast. He told them in verse 12, remember. Remember that you once were slaves in Egypt. So be careful to obey all of God's commands. Remember that you once were in darkness. Remember that you once had no hope. Remember once that I was that person that everybody did not want to see in a church building for sure because of my lifestyle. And that's for all of us. How soon we forget. How soon God's people would forget, His chosen people. But how soon we forget that, you know what? I once was in darkness. I once was in slavery also. And someone showed me Jesus. Someone showed me the light. Someone showed me someone who loves me so much that they gave their life for me. Okay, so what am I supposed to give? Okay, it's got to have something in return, right? And I was shown and taught that He wanted nothing in return. There was no way that I could earn it. There was no way that I could ever be good enough. But did I believe? See, He converted me out of my unbelief. Do I believe Jesus? Do I trust Him? Just like God with these first ones, with the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, of harvest. Do I trust Jesus that He's going to provide for me in every way? That where I fall short, that He's going to be there to fill that gap, and not just fill the gap. Matter of fact, He's going to be my everything. Do I believe that? Do you believe that? You see, I believe that we can see the correlation for us today, hopefully. Anyone who puts their faith and their trust in Jesus is freed from sin, their sin. Anyone who's living a lifestyle right now that we think is so far gone, there is no way. There's always a way. And that way is Jesus. In Romans 1, and I think it's verse, I don't know if it's 14, 15, or 16, somewhere right around in there, he talks about, you know what the power of God is? You know what the power of God is? It's not lightning bolts from heaven to get your attention, Nathan. It's not that. That's not the power of God. The power of God is not for Him to put fear in us. That's not how God operates. You know what Paul tells us that the power of God is in Romans 1:16? He says that the power of God is the good news of Jesus Christ. The power of God is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of Jesus Christ. And that good news is that regardless of who you are, regardless of who I am, regardless of where I am right now, and this is for other people outside of these walls, regardless of who they are and where they're at right now in their lives, the power, and the word for power there is the word dunamis in the original language. It's the word dynamite. That's where we get our word dynamite from. Dynamite is powerful. That's what the gospel is His word, the good news of Jesus Christ. And that's what changes lives. Paul said in Romans 6:6, when I am crucified with Christ and when I am buried with Him in baptism. Crucified with Christ. That's putting myself to death. When I am buried with Him in baptism, that is a funeral. We have crucified ourselves with Christ. We have been put to death with Christ. I have made that decision to get up on that cross with Him and to die to self. Not in a literal physical sense, but in a very literal spiritual sense. I am crucified with Christ. And I am buried with Him in baptism. I have a funeral. But yet I am resurrected. Just like Jesus was resurrected out of the grave. This is the miracle of Pentecost. Jesus resurrects you. He resurrects me. I'm not the same person. He resurrects us to a new life. A life that is freed from sin. So, with that, let's take the Lord's Supper together.